Good afternoon. I'm delighted to be here. The refugee crisis is a perpetual crisis. As long as there's been conflict, there have been refugees. I myself am the child of Palestinian refugees. They're first, born and raised in the country right across the river from the one they fled. We were lucky. My family escaped the drudgeries of the refugee camps to live a life of tenuous citizenry in the alternate homeland, Al-Watan al-Badil. Others around the world are not so lucky. Many are settled where they initially arrive, their tents simply morphing into the sturdier, stiflingly close, zinc-roofed rooms of the shanty towns. Still many others never complete the perilous journey. Countless refugees have drowned in capsized boats and rafts, asphyxiated in the cargo holds of otherwise seaworthy and roadworthy vessels, and succumbed to the limitations of their bodies, the elements, and the relentless indifference, if not cruelty, of the watching and waiting human race. And indeed, over the past 9 years, the human race has been doing much watching and waiting as hundreds of thousands of displaced and dispossessed human beings, the highest numbers since World War II, make their way out of the conflict zones of the Middle East and Africa and up and across the Arab world and Europe. And then there was Aylan Kurdi. Do you remember him? He drowned with his mother and his little brother on their way to Europe on a raft. His 3-year-old little body, seriously dressed for a dark and serious passage and moored by death on the shores of a resort town in Turkey, broke our hearts. It was visual proof of a horror we knew existed because the news told us every day, but rarely saw in the media. When is a violent death so delicate, so gentle, so unassuming, so non-threatening as to be so easily shareable? That fall of 2015, Europe's conscience quickened for a brief moment. Hungary, gatekeeping for itself and the rest of Western Europe, temporarily eased its chokehold on thousands of refugees trying to make their way north. Germany temporarily accepted with open arms the streaming multitudes. England grumbled anemically about quotas. And the Pope Francis, called on every parish in Europe to host one refugee family. But what did academic institutions do with the broken hearts, with the dead and dying bodies, with the endless convoy of humanity trying to make its way from misery to the unknown? What is our responsibility as students and teachers and administrators of higher learning? What is our complicity and accountability as institutions built on the lands of the displaced and the dispossessed? Our go-to is to objectively educate, to lift consciousness, to raise awareness, and surely these are admirable goals. What is nobler than the desire to impart knowledge, to broaden horizons, to engender useful, meaningful, productive conversations, to challenge and engage? I've come to see these endeavors, however, as ones firmly grounded in and ones which facilitate the detachment and depoliticization of academic institutions. They're ensconced in the life of the innocent mind, and if we're lucky, they might extend to the belief that the mind will influence the soul, which will influence the body, which will then do. Please don't misunderstand me. I love teaching. I'm the kind of teacher who all but bounces off the classroom walls. However, my annual post-summer return to the daily routine of college life had long been steeped in a malaise that drains, that leadens the legs and keeps them off the walls and on the ground. That deepening sorrow had a lot to do with how little I felt I was able to accomplish outside of my metaphoric institutional walls, because I was getting tired of the vigils, of the panels, of the teach-ins, of clicking a button, signing my name, don't forget your institution, on an online petition or letter. That fall of 2015, all I wanted to be was someone living in Europe who owned a car, so I can be part of that not long enough convoy of vehicles driven by Austrian activists making their way south to Hungary to carry back up the thousands too long convoy of human beings making their way north to Germany. but I was in Greensboro, North Carolina, the Gate City. And then a thought circled around. What if we saw the college or university campus not as a disembodied beehive of thinkers or learners, but as much a place as it is a body? And of course, a campus is a body. It's a body politic. It's a self-governing, self-regulating, self-sufficient city. The Arabic word for college or university campus is haram, al-haram al-jami'i. It means a place that is both inviolable and sacred, a sanctuary, a refuge. And then the thought circled in. I might not be in Europe with a car, but I am in another popular refugee destination with something even better, a college campus. And then the thought settled. If we saw the college or university campus in this other embodied way, right, as a place, as a body, could we not expand our response to the refugee crisis beyond the vigils, beyond the panels, beyond the food and clothes drives? If the EU and the UN have called on Arab and European nations to take in their quota of refugees, and if the Pope called on every parish in Europe to host a refugee family, could we not see the college or university campus as similarly responsible as a country or a parish and capable of hosting refugees? What I'm suggesting here entails a radical reimagining, a revisioning of what a college or university campus can and should be, a physical place of refuge in times of crisis. And a campus is organically well suited for this. We just need to relook at it that way, that's all. And when we do, we see how, just like a small city, a campus has everything necessary to allow it to function like a city. We have housing, we have cafeterias, we have clinics, and we have plenty of human resources, expertise, and connections to provide financial, social, and cultural support. In fact, if you think about it, the college or university campus has more material and human resources than almost any other organization. In this powerful act of revision, what has to be adjusted, what has to change, is us, not the place. The seer's vision has to be corrected so that a space we inhabit daily, right? We show up every day. We've normalized, we see it as one thing, can be reimagined, reseen as another. So for me to see my campus, Guilford College, differently, to use it differently, to reshape its contours, I had to look at it anew with fresh and urgent eyes. Because for the longest time, I'd always seen and understood higher education, the place where I live, where I teach, as a place fundamental to acts of cleaving and leavening, building and unsettling, right? We like to disrupt. But my revision of it has been animated by an ethos of wholeness, right? So now in my classes, for example, I teach forced migration and resettlement studies, I teach Arab women writers, I teach refugee and immigrant literature. More than simply trying to bridge what happens inside of traditional teaching spaces with what happens outside of them, I try to teach in a way that makes it impossible for my students to compartmentalize those spaces. I teach in a way that makes them see how the outside and the inside are of the same place. How fundamentally the well-being of one, right, so the supposed inside, but also the self, the singular, is connected to the well-being of the other, the supposed outside, but also the presumed other. Our beings within us and between us are intersectional and inseparable, and they have to be approached as such, as a whole. In short, this is an incredible opportunity for everybody involved. Imagine it. A community comes together, drawing on its many skills in law, in medicine, in language, in education, in advocacy, to give a family that needs a safe refuge, a safe home, a campus. This has to be done, however, without exploiting the refugee family, right? It has to be done with intentionally crafted attention to their dignity and their agency. So at Guilford College, where I teach, and where we might righteously see these endeavors as a natural extension of our core values, we're a Quaker school, and also our historical legacy as part of the Underground Railroad, we must also rightly see them as necessitated by another legacy we've inherited, that of empire building and colonialism and global politics, which have displaced and dispossessed the indigenous people of this land, the Catawba, the Saponi, the Sara, and many others around the globe. We have to engage in these meaningful acts of solidarity while subjecting them to rigorous self-awareness and criticism. So that fall in 2015, I walked into Guilford College's president's office and I asked for a house on our campus to host refugees. And she said very simply, yes. And every campus of refuge was born. We partnered with local organizations, including local refugee resettlement agencies, to design a campus-based hosting initiative built around the needs, agency, and dignity of the guests we would be hosting. And we steward every possible resource at our disposal. I call myself a hacker. I like to hack my institutional resources. And when I say our, I mean an expansive our beyond Guilford College. Those resources include, of course, housing, but also the career center, the gym, facilities, and in one very important and remarkable example, when we hosted a calligraphist and an artist, our art department, its art supplies, and then our art gallery in the library to exhibit his work. Where else but on a college campus is there both housing and an art department and a gallery? Most importantly, we also steward the resources of those willing, able, trained volunteers who bring their skills, their passions, their interests, their disciplines to this asset-based community of practice that provides a softer landing and a stronger beginning to refugees resettling in Greensboro. Since January of 2016, we have hosted 52 refugees on our campus. 26 of them have been children. They have come from Syria, Iraq, the Sudan, Rwanda, Uganda, and the DRC, and I'm very happy to announce that on March 3rd, we will be receiving and hosting a family of 5, which includes 3 children. This is the first family that we'll be hosting from South America. They have all successfully, the ones that we've hosted, resettled in Greensboro. There are 6 other Every Campus a Refuge chapters, including right here at Wake Forest, who have collectively hosted more than 100 refugees. My students and I continue to call on others to similarly revision higher education in this way, including at the United Nations. At Guilford College, I've also designed a minor where students can study, think about, engage these issues right there on their campus in their city and earn credit for the work of hosting refugees and supporting them in resettlement. The US is accepting historically low number of refugees, the lowest, but all of them will be headed to a place where there's a college or university campus. In the face of this catastrophe, really this multifaceted disaster, one with deep and far-reaching psychological, physical, economic, political, social damages, the cost of hosting a family on campus grounds is truly minimal. Its rewards are astronomical. And a family would find a small country whose citizens share the responsibility and the joys of giving them a campus, a refuge. I'd like to end on a poem that I wrote after a conversation I had with the teenage boy in the first Syrian family that we hosted. The poem is entitled Blad, and Blad means the old country in Levantine Arabic. He said it was a country then, and by country, he meant that the sky rained water, not shrapnel, that the earth grew cedars, not teetering columns, all that is left of the buildings, that the neighbors came over for tea unmasked, gunless. He said the whole family would go to the shore, deck the sand with barbecue pits, the men falling in rows to play the durbakke by the waterline. Now they are dumping the bodies in the sea. No place to bury them, they said. Why don't they bury them in the desert? The desert is so vast and can hold so many bodies. I have no answers for his question. Conversations like these are one-sided. And what could I have said? That perhaps overwhelming death coupled with persistent threat necessitates a quickness the rushing of the waves provides. The sea is a place that is somewhere there beyond the waterline. That is why the others are leaving, why your parents have left. Here, on this side of the waterline, is nowhere. Thank you.